Hi guys, welcome to the second part of the user management system that we are trying to create. So in the last tutorial we were able to set up our views and then our login views and then our register views. So let's continue by having to run npm run dev to start our server. Okay, connected, and let's open our browser by saying bringing in our browser. Then let's go to localhost port 5000, and this is what we have. So we have our login and then we have our register too as well. So let's start off by having to create our user, where we first have to create our route. If we click on register, we get our post route, cannot post to the user. But first of all, let us change that from the view to the views. We have our register. Let's go into our register file.egs. Let's change this to users, where we post to our endpoint users. Let's come back, refresh, post to the endpoint users. Okay, so back in our user route, we will say router.post /users. We will have to use a user controller, create user controller, where we pass it from our user controller function. This will generate an error because we've not created this file yet, this function yet, sorry. So we come in here and we say const create user controller, should be an async function, pass the request response, then say res.send. Let's test it by saying res.send create user, and then we export the function in here. So we try to refresh to see if it will work, and then create user function. But to continue, I have this extension that I use when making the HTTP request, where I'll have to create request.rest. This is an extension that's on VS Code, which I installed. So in here we can create a post request. Then we say go to HTTP localhost port 5000, and then the endpoint users, and we pass the content type, should be application for JSON. Then the content can be, that will be the name, should be, let's say, Kofi Ahen, and then the email should be, let's say, Kofi Ahen @gmail.com, and the password should be password. But we don't have to store the plain password in our database for security purposes, but we will handle that a bit later. But let's just test our endpoints to see if this works. So we then go by sending the request to see if the endpoint works, and so we get the same thing as having to pass it through the browser in here. Okay, cool. So let's make this full screen. So back in the user controller, first of all, we have to bring in the user model from the models user in here. Then we say we will need the name, email, and then the password. So we can then destructure it from our request or body by saying name, email, and password, which will pass in from our request.body. So let us send that, test that by sending it as a JSON. And then let's say name, email, and then password. Okay, let's come into our request file, send, and then we have that. Okay, but before that, let us try to encrypt our password first by saying that user schema .pre, before we save it into our database, there should be an async function, and then we pass the next as a middleware, and then we say function, yeah, and then we say if this.is modified, we say if the dot is defined password, then we will need our salt to encrypt the password, where we use bcrypt gen salt 10, and then const hashed password should be await bcrypt dot hash. This is the password. This is the password, and then we pass the salt. Then we say this is the password should be equals to hashed password instead of the what error are we getting? Instead of the plain password. So we have an error here. It's only valid. We made a mistake here, so let's cut this out and then clear this and rewrite it again. It should be an async function which will pass the next in here, and let's paste back the code, save it, check to see if we have any errors. Encrypt the hash. Let us start the server again. Okay, dev. Syntax error. Await, sorry. This await. Yeah. So before we save the password, we have to generate a salt so that two similar passwords will not be the same. And then let's close this up. We pass in the password that the user will pass in here. We add it to the salt, which will hash the password for us. And then we say this dot the password that the user has provided should be the hashed password. So when we come back to the user controller in here, and then we've not saved the user yet, so we can say const user equals to user equals to new user. I'll pass the name, email, and then the password. And then let's try and console.log the user to see if the password has been created. And then let us send back the user. This is not what we're going to do, but we are just trying to send to test to see if the endpoint is working, or it's doing exactly as we are saying. We have an error here. What's the problem? Password is not defined. Let's go to the user schema to see what the problem is. User controller. It's in the user controller. Okay, this. Okay. Let's go back into the REST client. Send the request again. It's not hashing the password. If this dot is modified, oh, then let's pass the next in here. And then close this up. Let's send the request to see what we get. Oh, so we are saying that if it is not modified, if it is pre-saved, we should modify the password, but we are not saving it yet. So what we can do is now put this in a try catch block, and then see await user.save console.log user, and then let's send the user back to the endpoint, and then if there's an error, we console log the error. I should do it. Let's go back, send the request again. Yeah, so if you check the password, this has been hashed to this instead of the plain password. So if we check our let's check our database to see if the user has been stored. So I'm using Compass, Mongo Compass as my database. This is the connection to the database that we are connecting to. Then we connect. We check our databases. I have these databases. Yours might not look like this because I've created the database and a lot of database. So when you check on the user management database, we have one document in here. You check the document. Let's make it a bit bigger. And check. Then we have this as the document that we have stored in our database where we've hashed our password. Okay, so let's go back and then create another user in here. Then we say let's use LeBron James. Then we say lebron@gmail.com. Pass that. Let's send the request. It creates that for us. And then hash our password. Let's go back into our database, and then let's refresh the database. Let's make this bigger. Let's make this refresh the database. Then we have that as our document in here. pretty much simple. Okay, but since we are going to use the browser, let us also test the browser to see what we might also get. So let's go back and then refresh, and let's use Steph Curry. I like basketball, so you get to see a lot of basketball names. Steph@gmail.com. Steph is not my favorite player, no. That's by the way. And then password. Let us register, and then we have that as a response from the endpoint. But instead of having to send the database, the data from the endpoint, the user from the endpoint, let us rather redirect to the login page where we will then ask the user to log in. So we have trace, try catch. So let us redirect to the login page like that. All right, let's try it out again in the browser. Then come back, refresh. Let us try another basketball name. Who do we have? Kyrie Irving. So Kyrie at gmail.com, and then type in the password, which should be password. Let us register, and that brings us back to the login page. Cool. Okay, so now let us also create an endpoint for the login. An endpoint for the login where when the user enters the data for the email, then in the password, we log in like that. Okay, so back in our user controller, we say back in the user route, actually, let's go into the user route. Then you say router.post/login, say login controller. Then we get that from our user login controller. So we say login controller in here. This will generate an error because, as usual, we've not created the function yet. So we come into the user controller in here, and then let's create the function for the login. Should be an async, pass the request response, and then first let's test the endpoint by saying login user, and then let us export the function in here. Okay, let's refresh to see if our endpoint is working. Let's come into the routes to check what the problem is. Okay, so look into the login form. All right, it should be login in here. Save, go back, refresh, send login user. So instead of using the browser, let us come back to the request, the JSON file, request.rest file. When you do this 3 steps, means you want to do another request in here. So it should be a post function in here. Then we go to http://local host and put 5000, then login, let's send the request. We are not passing the data yet, but this is the response that we will get. Okay, so now let us pass the data by saying the content type should be application JSON, and then the details we will need will be the email, which would be lebron@gmail.com, and then the password will be the password we provided. Okay, let's send the request to see if we might get any errors. No errors. Cool. So in the user controller in here, what we then have to do is to grab the data that we will need from the body request. So first we are passing the name, email actually, and then the password. Then we get that from the request body, and then also then let us use that to find the user, if the user is in the database, by saying let's pass it in a try catch method. We say const user equals to await user dot find one, where the email is that. Since we are using the user model in here, let us grab that from, which we've already grabbed that from here, and then we say if you don't find the user, then res.status let's do for then JSON, then we say error user not found. We will have to return from here, else we might run into some errors. So we will return here, else. First of all, let's just where's the JSON. Let's send the user back and set the status. Automatically it will set the status to 200. Yeah, it will send the set the status to 200, but let us manually set it here by saying res.status 200. Then let's pass the user back. So if we go to our REST client in here, then if we send the request, yes, we get the user back. But assuming let's just change this and do that, pass in the wrong email address, and then let us send the request, we get the error user not found. Okay, so let's fix it back like that. Send the request again. Yeah, everything is working. So back in here, back in the user controller, let's close some of the files that we don't need in here. There. Okay, let's keep this. So back in the user controller, if we get the error, we get the user, what we have to do is compare the password to see if it's correct. So we then have to say const is, if it is auth, we await bcrypt compare compare the password with the user.password. First of all, let us bring in the bcrypt model. So we do bcrypt equals to require decrypt.js, and then let's console.log is out to see if it's the right password the user provided. First.send is auth. Okay, so let's go back into our REST client. In here, send the request. So it's true. So let's just change the password, add something to it, and then say, then we get false. Okay. So send the request. True. So now that the request, the user and then the password is true, what we can also do is to generate some tokens so that anytime the user logs in, we generate a token for the user to be able to access protected route. So in here we say generate token, so const equals to jwt.sign. We provide the payload. First one to pass the user.name, and then user.email, and then we pass the secret that we use to sign the token. So access, I want to use access token secret. We are passing this. We are passing that from the this is an object. This is an object, so we have to do name user.name email user.email in here like that. Let's see if we have the error stuff. All right, so since we are using the access token secret, let's copy this, come to our environment variable, and then we paste that in here, and then we add whatever secret that you'd want. Usually I'll come in here, and then let's clear the console, and then we say we start our node, then require crypto dot gen dot random byte. I want 64 dot to string, and that should be hex. Okay, so this gives us random bytes, random strings that we might need. We copy that and we paste it in here as our secret. You can do whatever that makes, that you want, but usually I would like to generate my secret like this. All right, so when we come back to the request client, controller. Let's check to see if our token has been created, and then let's forward it to send back our token here. Come in here, send the request again. There's an error. JWT. Okay, we didn't get the JWT, so JWT equals to require JSON Web Token, like that. Come back into our REST client. First off, let's restart the our server, because the environment variable, we need to restart it anytime that we make changes in the environment variables, because it might not work. Okay, so let's come back to the user controller. No, actually the REST request. Come back in here, send a request. Yes, our token has been generated for us. Okay, so from there, let us also set the cookie by having to use the cookie parser. Let's check our package.json if we have the cookie parser installed. Then package.json. Did we install the cookie parser? No. So let's just restart and the server. And then we say npm cookie parser to help us store cookies. All right, let's clear the beta visit man. Npm run dev connected. Let's come back to our server and then use the cookie parser to help us set our cookies. So we say const cookie parser equals to require cookie parser, and then we use that by saying that, passing it as a middleware by saying app.use cookie parser, like that. Cool. So back into the user controller, after we've generated our token, which will be, after we've generated our token, we set the cookies by saying res.cookie token to be our token in here. Then we redirect to /home. We've not created this route yet, so let's come into the user route, where we say router.get /home or dashboard probably. We then use home controller. So let us pass it from here. Then we say home controller. That should generate some errors for us because we've not created that function yet. So we come in here, then we do home controller equals to pass the request response, and then we render the home view. So what's the problem? Then let us export the home controller in here. We say everything is fine. So we come back into our views, then we create the home file, home.ejs, then we have our h1 in here, then we do home page, save. That should work. Okay, so let's go back to the REST client in here, and then let us send the request to see if we get our home page. Okay, content type, request redirected. Okay, home, that. Okay, that works. So let us go back into our login page, refresh, and let us go to lebron@gmail.com and password. It should be render, sorry. We are getting some funny errors today. So in here, it's render, yeah. Go back, log in again, yeah. Homepage, cool. Let's check to see if we have, when we inspect our browser, let's make this bigger. When you inspect the browser and then you go to application, when you check the cookies, check the cookies, no. Storage, localhost. Okay, let's go back into, let's close this. So at this point, let us try and then create protected route so that only people who are logging can view the home page. So in the home page, let us create a middleware in here. Then let's create a file which will be auth.js. Then we'll say const is auth equals to, it's supposed to be an async function, request response, and then we pass the next. Then we'll say let us try and then grab the token from request.cookies. We want the .token. So if we have the token, what we want to do is move on to the next. We will then do the how do you call it, verification of the token later, but if we have the token, let's bring in JWT. Let's try and do that for now. Once we need the JWT require JSON Web Token, then once we will need the user model to find the user if the user is in the database, it will be in the models folder, and then we want the user. Okay, so what then we can do is to verify the token. We say verify token. So we say jwt.verify token. Then we pass the secret access token secret, and then from there if it's an error, but have the error parameter, then the data that we will get, and then if there's an error, return whereas the status 304 that render, let's render the error page, and then pass the error as a variable. Say you invalid credentials. Like that. Other than that, we set the request.user to be the data. Then we move on to the next. We move on to the next middleware, like that. And then let us export this module.export equals to the is auth in here. Cool. So let us go over the code. First, if we grab the token from here, from the request.cookies.token. So if there's a token, do verify the token for us. Verify the token for us. If there's an error, we return 304, and we say no token, invalid credentials. Let's say unauthorized access, rather. So save that. Other than that, sets the user request.user to be our data, then move on to the next middleware. That, or else if no token is provided, rest.render, do the same error page, and then we pass in our error to be invalid credentials. Yeah. Else let's return in here. Cool. So we can then use this as a middleware where we come into our controllers, user routes actually. Let's go into the routes folder, user route, and then bring in the auth middleware, we will require it from our middleware, then auth, like that. Cool. So we then pass this auth here, we save it, connect it. Cool. So let us try and then refresh this to see if it will work. We have an error. Let's check what the problem is. Cannot read property of undefined token. Cool. Okay. Let's go back in here and then try and then log in again. Host 5000. What's the problem? Let's restart the server. Let's restart the server to see what we get. Okay. Let's go back into browser, refresh. Okay. So we log in here, then we say run at gmail.com, then password. We have an error. Okay. Let's use a REST client instead. So let's log in here. Okay, let's go back to the user controller and then check to see if the cookies have been set before the user route before we use it. Sometimes these are the little errors that you run into when you are dealing with, when you are programming. It also depicts that nothing is straightforward when you are working on your code. So what we can probably do is to try and log in here again. Okay, the login works. Let's close that. Let's go back into the user route and then the home controller, and then let's just try and then console.log. Come on. Console.log request.cookies. So instead of rendering it for now, let us try and then send just like that. Let us come back into the request to JSON, and let us create a new endpoint request. Call host port 5000 and home. Let's send it to the endpoint. Close. There's an error. User controller. Close this. Close this. Controller. let's do send cookies in here and see what we get. Send cookies, that works. Cannot read properties of. Oh. Should it be res? Close this. Send it again. Undefined. Wait, let us try and log in again. Let's just scratching the user. Let's try and log in again and see something. Undefined. Let's go back to the the login to see what we are doing wrong. Controllers. So what we say is login. We generate the cookie token. Okay, so sometimes when you run into this error, sometimes this is where I always like to emphasize of having to Google errors. So usually you go to Stack Overflow, but now ChatGPT is in session, and let me show you the power of ChatGPT. So you can then say act as an expert in Node.js, then say how do I set cookies with cookie parser. See what ChatGPT gives us. Okay, I think we are doing the right thing. So I get the cookie. Oh, it's requested cookies actually. first and then npm run dev again. So back in our login, assign the login to works. Okay. Send the request to the home. That's setting the cookie, rest.cookie, setting the cookie here. Undefined. Oh, okay. Okay, so I found what we're not doing right. We had to move the cookie parser from here to the top. So we say, so we have the token in here. Cool. Let's just close this. Then back into our user route. We bring in the auth in here. We save. Let's go to the request. Send request. Okay, let's check what this is about. Oh. Let's send the, yeah, everything works. Okay, cool. Let's check. All right, okay. So back in the user controller, let's render the home. So let's render home. Then we pass the user in here. Save it. Okay. Let's come in here and send. We are running into some mad error, man. Oh. Let's request that user. Sorry, user should be. Sorry. Let's send the request again. Cool. Everything works. Okay, let's close up this. Go back into our browser. Refresh homepage. But what we want to also do is that when we log in, we want to change this header to something else. So let's change that in our views by having to create a new layout for the partials. I would say dash, let's say home.ejs here. Then let's come into our main file, copy everything in here. Then let us come in here, paste that. Then inside we say home. Inside the partials, we rather use the home header, home underscore header. Let's save that. So inside our partials, let's create a new partial. Then we say home underscore header dot EJS, and let's come to our header EJS file. Let's copy everything in here, and then home header, let's paste this in here. So instead of login, we'll do logout. Then in here we will rather go to logout endpoint. So back in the it's getting complicated. Let's back in the home controller. Let's close this up. Let's close this. Let's go to controllers, close the middleware, user controller. Back in the back in the user controller, we pass this as the layout to be /views/layout, and then the home. Let's come in here, refresh. Yeah, then we have the logout instead of the register, and then the logout. We then have to also create the logout endpoint for the user. But before we do that, let's go to the home. Let's close this. Let's go to the home EJS, and then let's rather populate. Let's do class heading, and then let us populate this to be user.name, and then try to refresh it. Then we have LeBron James. Cool. So let's also create the endpoint for the logout. So let's come back to the user route. Which will be in our route folder. Let's come in here, then we say router.get/logout, and then we've passed in logout controller, and then we pass it from here, logout controller. This will generate some errors for us because we've not created that function yet. So we come in here, then we create our function again. Pass the request response. Then what we do is to clear the cookie, rest.clear cookie token, render the home page, and then we pass the layout to be layout, then make res dot redirect, sorry, res dot redirect to / login. That should be it. Let's check to see if we have some errors in here. Then let us export the login controller, the logout controller in here. Let's check to see if we have some errors now. So let's go to the endpoint to see what we get. Yeah, everything works. Cool. So let's come back in here and then try and then log in again with a different account password. Cool. Let's go back into the CSS and then change some things in here. Then we say how do we capitalize word? So let's go back to ChatGPT and say my brain is a bit foggy now, so wait. Text transform. Yeah. Sorry. You say text transform capitalize. Okay. So text transform capitalize. Yeah. Just to style it up a bit. Cool. So instead of doing Kofi Ahin, we can just say we can say welcome Kofi Ahin, something like that. Refresh. Yeah. So we log out, register new user. We say Jason Tatum, jason@gmail.com, then password, register. So in here we say @gmail.com password. Cool. Cool. Let's try to see when we log in with a wrong password. Login. Okay, so basically this will be it for the tutorial. Thanks for watching.